Hi everyone, this is an update on my 2020 Lotus Evora GT. Just got it back from service from Lotus of Philadelphia, and also just had first repair done on the car in its first year of ownership with me. I purchased this car used, put about 3,000 miles on it this past year. Just want to share my experience with the car, what I liked about it, what I didn't like so much about it, and how much it cost me to own. First off, I think this car looks awesome. Really like the mid-engine design, but this isn't your typical mid-engine design because of the rear seats. The cabin area is just a little bit bigger, and I feel like the proportions are just more balanced on this car, less cab forward. Really like all the functional vents on the car. This car is really, I feel like, function over form, but not in that it's ugly, and that everything that is part of the design I feel like is functional. All the functional vents, to include the big vent for the airflow for the radiators on the hood, the fender vents to alleviate pressure for the wheel wells, the intake vents that are on the side of the car, the cooling vents that are on top of the rear hatch. Everything here is functional. The aggressive rear diffuser. So, and things you don't see is that the bottom of the car is just so flat with the aluminum paneling underneath. It's just really neat. And also design elements of this car that support the lightness of it, to include the single wiper, which I haven't used much during this past year, but when I have, I just think it's really cool to see the single wiper. To me, that's just very, very race car. So looks of the car, for sure. Driving of the car. So this car, to me, is very dynamic. It is playful, more playful than the 911s that I've experienced, including my 2009. I think their rear end is a little bit easier to come loose, but not in a scary way. But in a playful way. So from that perspective, this car is just a playful car. And a lot of sports cars are just more serious, especially if they're more track focused. In this case, I feel like this car is, in addition to being controlled, high limits, it is playful. The shifter in this car, I think, is great. It's very mechanical. The rifle action is how it's described. It's not a fast shifter. It's not like a Honda S2000 or Civic Type bar shifter where it just clicks in with a single finger. This requires a little more work, but it's very satisfying. So not for quick shifting, but it's for enjoyment, for the driving feel. The other aspect of the drive is the steering. This has hydraulic steering. Amazing feel, a lot of feedback, not quite as noisy as my 2009 911, which is not a bad thing. I feel like this is very communicative. You get a lot of feedback without the wheel getting pulled out too much on bumpy roads. Suspension is really compliant on this car for what it is. I drove this car from Florida to New Jersey over 1,000 miles and didn't think it was harsh at all. I'm driving on a somewhat bumpy road right now, and yeah, it's not getting upset. Nothing jarring about it. So it's very, very well designed suspension. It has iBox springs with Bilstein dampers from the factory. The engine note is good. It could be louder from the factory. There is a third cat on this car, but that can be easily remedied with a $250 part to remove the third cat, and that would make it louder. Also on the intake side, though you can't hear the supercharger, it's pretty loud on the outside, but on the inside, like most modern cars, the manufacturer had added some things to the airbox to help quiet it down. But with an aftermarket airbox or aftermarket intake, I've heard that these get quite a bit louder. The other pro of this car that is the fact that there aren't many out there. It's pretty rare. It's rare to come across one at a Cars and Coffee. I've formed some good friendships this past year from this car, just from the attention that it's gotten and feedback I've gotten from other people. So it's been really cool to also connect with the Lotus community, which I feel like is just a really cool community of car enthusiasts. So it's been neat to experience that this past year. I think this car is very functional. The climate control uses knobs. It's very analog gauge clusters. This is an older design, goes back to 2009, but of course this is a 2020 car. This has, the 2020 car with hydraulic steering. The engine is still port injection, so you don't have to worry about carbon buildup. So it's somewhat of a older school design. You know, you can see it's been proven. You know, this car works. You know, I would say some of the downsides of this car, or you know, and they're really not big. One would be the trunk gets hot, and the trunk is relatively small. However, this car does have back seats, and you know, that could be used for cargo as well. The back seats in this car are not quite as roomy as the 911s, at least the older 911s. That's the 997, 991 generation. Part of it is just the seat area is a little bit higher. The legroom is about the same, but the seat is higher, so there's less headroom. There is a little cutout in the back to allow the head for the head to not hit, but you're sitting back there, you're going to be seeing kind of a lip that comes down. So my kids definitely prefer the 911 over this car when it comes to sitting in the back seat. One thing I've found a little bit annoying is just the dealer network. Fortunately, I have 2 dealers within an hour of me, but I had my first problem pop up about a month ago, which was the rear wheel speed sensor was throwing an error that was causing the traction control to not work, which also impacted the sport mode on the car. So that was a problem. I couldn't figure that out myself. I thought it was the brake light sensor. Changed that. It's only a $14 part, but that did not resolve the problem. So it was the wheel speed sensor, and that's something that I would not have found out with the tools I have at home. It's not something you would find out with an OBD2 scanner. So that's been resolved. You know, fortunately, I'm not that far from a dealer, but still, that's 2 hours round trip. Second con, I would say the cost of maintaining this car, at least at a service center, if you're not doing it yourself, could be on the more expensive side. Wheel speed sensor cost $500, and my 4-year service, which included the serpentine belt, baffles, and the oil pan that helps prevent oil starvation at high G loads or cornering, coolant, oil, brake and clutch fluid change, air filter change, cabin filter change. That came out to $3,600 plus tax. So this service cost me $4,300 with tax. Now, I thought about taking on this job myself. I am handy enough, but unfortunately limited in time. And you know, this could also be good information for folks who are not as handy or don't have access to tools or the workspace to know what it takes to service one of these cars at the Lotus dealership. I don't know of many or any independent mechanics around me that have experience with the car. I'm sure any independent mechanic can work on it. It is a Toyota engine, but as far as having had experience with it, not sure. And I don't want to risk damaging this car. And the other thing is parts. You know, in terms of parts availability, I'm guessing there are places you could just order it, but you know, going through the Lotus dealer network, I think was just easier. So quality of this car, build quality seems fine. There are some things like the seats creaking that a little bit annoying. I don't notice it once I'm moving, but when I'm getting in and out of the car, I certainly hear it. You know, windows. Actually, I guess they fixed the window seal. It was screeching quite a bit, but it looks like the dealer had fixed that in the service. The infotainment system is on the old school side. I don't know how many people will be using this as a daily, though you can. I think this car is comfortable enough to be used as a daily. These seats, though they're bucket seats, they're not hard to get in and out of. It's not like the Porsche carbon seats, which just are a little bit taller on the side, so a little bit harder to get in and out of. I'm not finding that with these seats. This car requires a battery tender, and that it goes dead pretty quickly without a battery tender. So I was told even a couple of weeks. The longest I've had it not connected to a tender is 3 weeks. In the wintertime, when I went to turn on the car, the lights would dim. In the summertime, I had no problems with turning on the car after it sat for 3 weeks, not on a tender. The car came with a tender. It's just a matter of, in the wintertime, I had this car in storage, didn't have access to a plug, so every couple of weeks I would move the car back home to put on a battery tender. See, another concern is more the going back to parts availability. Not a problem for me, but windshield replacement on a Lotus Evora 400 that I was looking at a dealership, that part or repair took about a month because of the delay time in getting the part in to replace the windshield. So that can be a problem if this is your only car, but as a secondary car, I don't think that's really going to be an issue. As far as my cost, I mentioned the service, so $4,300 in service this year, plus for a $14 part. The insurance for this car is in between my Tesla Model S Plaid, which is higher, and our Lexus RX 350 hybrid. So it's in between. They're actually pretty close to the insurance cost for the Lexus. I don't recall the exact number. It's not going to matter because that's going to be dependent on the owners. Gas mileage, I've been seeing on the highway around 25 miles per gallon, which is pretty efficient. This gearing is short, and just kind of mixed driving, and this particular tank, I'm seeing 20.7 gallons, and this tank is almost empty. And this has some stop and go traffic and local driving. That's it as far as cost for this car. Fortunately, there weren't any of the repairs required this past year, and the repair that was required was not a major one. This is a Toyota engine. Have not noticed any oil consumption between oil changes this past year. It was full the dipstick was full when I had picked up the car, at least it was at the full level. And even when I dropped it off for service, it was still at the full level. And I checked my oil regularly because you just never know. The first year I'm learning about the car, so it wasn't a problem. So I would say this car is still as exciting to me as it was when I first got it. I love the usability of the car with the back seats, usable trunk. This is the third car I use, so I do take out my Tesla, obviously, that's my daily and primary car. My 911, I find it's just probably just because it's more available to me in terms of how I have it parked at the house. And in the summertime, I've been taking that out just because of the convertible, and also for transporting kids, they just prefer that car. But this car is exciting to me. It's kind of ruined it for some other cars. I've recently drove a LC500, which I really enjoyed driving before I bought this car. Found one in a spec that I like, went to go test drive it, and just didn't like it at all anymore because I'm so used to the visceral feel of this car, especially the hydraulic steering. They're relatively lightweight. I mean, 3,100 pounds is not, it's not like S2000 light or Miata light, but for what it is, it's relatively lightweight. And yeah, just the shifter feel, I mean, just the engagement of this car and how special it looks, it's kind of ruined it for other cars. Not a bad thing. So my standards have changed. I drove a Boxster 718 Boxster Spider just the other week and thought it was comparable in terms of excitement. That was a little bit more refined. This car feels a little bit more fun. So that's the difference there. Recently drove a McLaren 570S. That car feels more special, but from a fun factor, not caring too much about straight line speed. I have a Model S Plaid, so I kind of get that out of my system. But just in an engagement perspective, I feel like they're pretty close. So that's kudos to Lotus for making this car available, and it's just been a great experience this past year. So yeah, that concludes my update. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. I'd like to hear your feedback. Do you own a Lotus Evora GT? What are your thoughts on the car? And also, what else do you drive, and what else are you considering if you're to replace it? I'm curious to know. Well, I appreciate the support. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.